The worst fate an unpopular leader might face today is the loss of an election, the removal from power, and the tarnishing of their legacy. However, in 1672, the Dutch people took the often repeated slogan of "eat the rich" quite literally when dealing with their then Prime Minister, Johan de Witt, a man who, along with his brother, suffered one of the darkest fates of any elected leader in European history. During the 16th century, much of the Netherlands was under the iron control of the Spanish crown. However, after suffering years of religious oppression and high taxes, the Dutch people finally revolted against the foreign overlords in 1568, waging an 80-year-long bitter war of independence against Spain that finally forced the Spanish king to recognize the Dutch Republic as an independent state in 1648. This tiny, newly born nation quickly grew into a prosperous and influential great power that was capable of punching well above its weight. Governed by a series of shrewd and competent leaders, the Republic took advantage of shifts in global trade to bring vast sums of wealth flowing into Amsterdam, firmly establishing the city as one of the world's major financial hubs. The Dutch were in a glorious golden age of exploration and sea-based trade. However, no golden age can last forever. Dark clouds were gathering on the horizon. With their jealous rivals in Europe watching for weakness, Dutch society fragmented into two rival factions, the Orange Party and the States Party. This divide would usher in the coming storm as France and England prepared to strike. The 80-year-long struggle for independence from Spain had been led by a succession of royal princes of the House of Orange, the most powerful and influential of the Dutch aristocrats. However, once the war ended, a more decentralized republican form of government was adopted. The House of Orange and their disillusioned supporters found themselves sidelined as an emerging class of bankers and merchants took over the reins of power. This new business elite was led by the competent and borderline genius Johan de Witt, a staunch Republican from a wealthy and powerful merchant family that firmly opposed the idea of a monarchy. Johan de Witt was elected Prime Minister in 1653 when he was just 28 years old, winning 3 re-elections during his 20-year time in power thanks to his competent stewardship of the nation's finances and shrewd diplomatic maneuvering that helped keep the peace and pit the Republic's primary rivals, England and France, against one another. With his brother Cornelis serving as Minister of Defense, Johan de Witt was one of the few non-royal leaders in Europe and did everything in his power to keep the Prince of Orange, William III, from holding any political position in the Republic. This action alienated Dutch citizens who disliked this new business elite that ruled over them, with many preferring to see the famous William III of the Royal House of Orange take charge. The Prime Minister became the highly visible target of people who despised everything he represented. The young Prince William had been pushed to the fringes of Dutch society, but was keen to find his way back into the spotlight. He was soon presented with the perfect opportunity to reassert his authority. Envious at the Dutch Republic's rapid rise to power and increasing domination of global trade, in 1672 England, France, and several small German states attacked, keen to snuff out their tiny rival and smother Dutch economic power once and for all. Threatened by the English fleet on the high seas and the French army on their doorstep, 1672 saw the fledgling Dutch Republic suffer a series of disastrous military defeats, so bad that even to this day it's known as the Disaster Year. The invasion had taken the Dutch and the Republican leaders by complete surprise. While the Dutch navy was still strong, the army had been neglected for years by politicians who believed in peace at any cost. No significant preparations for a war in Europe had been made, and the Dutch Prime Minister Johan de Witt had firmly believed that any international disputes with the Republic's neighbours could be solved diplomatically. He couldn't have been more wrong. Huge swathes of the country were occupied by enemy forces as panic spread like wildfire. It seemed as if the entire Dutch Republic was about to be swallowed up by the French king. There was no doubt in anyone's mind as to who was to blame. Prime Minister Johan de Witt's power disintegrated almost overnight as he became a symbol of the arrogance and carelessness that had brought the Dutch people to the brink of ruin. Encouraged by supporters of the Prince of Orange, the Dutch people yearned for a strong man to lead them out of disaster. Prince William III stepped forward as the perfect candidate. Violent protests against the Prime Minister erupted in every Dutch city, and on June 21st, 1672, he was stabbed by a would-be assassin who may have well been on Prince William's payroll. Although Johan survived, he was gravely injured and badly shaken by the attempt on his life. However, things went from bad to worse for the family when his brother Cornelis, the Minister of Defence, was arrested just a month later for plotting to assassinate Prince William, a charge that was likely fabricated by House of Orange supporters to eliminate the troublesome brothers from politics once and for all. Realising that his position was now untenable, the besieged Prime Minister Johan de Witt resigned 2 weeks later, on August 4, 1672. However, his enemies were still not satisfied. Convinced that his failure to defend the country was tantamount to treason, the mob was openly baying for his blood. Now imprisoned indefinitely, his brother Cornelis was subjected to merciless torture, as his jailers attempted to extract a confession that would not only implicate himself, but also his brother, the former Prime Minister, in the criminal plot. However, realizing that such a confession would almost certainly result in both of their executions, Cornelis refused to give the Orangists what they wanted, and after enduring days of torture without breaking, was instead sentenced to exile. Taking the opportunity to visit his brother one last time before he was sent into exile, Johan de Witt made his way to the prison. However, unbeknown to the ex-Prime Minister, he was walking right into a trap. An angry lynch mob gathered outside of the prison at the exact moment that the militia that was supposed to protect them was changing guard shifts. The old shift had withdrawn from duty before the new guard detachment had arrived, in what was either the worst scheduling mistake in history or part of a pre-planned plot. The brothers were now on their own and at the mercy of the mob. As they left the prison, Johan and Cornelis de Witt were set upon by the angry crowd, which by now had worked itself into a bloodthirsty frenzy, as otherwise ordinary citizens willingly abandoned their reason and sanity. As the brothers attempted to make their way back to the safety of home, an unknown member of the crowd opened fire. As the de Witts fell to the ground, the rest of the emboldened crowd surged forward, each man and woman wanting to strike their own blow against the now lifeless bodies of the hated men, as months of pent-up rage and frustration were taken out on the corpses of the fallen brothers. The crowd stabbed, sliced and kicked as the de Witts were quite literally torn apart. The rioters took whatever trophies they could cut off, with fingers, hair, teeth and vials of blood taken from the desecrated corpses as macabre souvenirs of the moment, many of which would be available for sale on the streets of Amsterdam in the coming days. Even more bizarrely, in the heat of the moment, some are said to have begun eating the flesh of the former Prime Minister and his brother, including the liver and even the eyeballs. Yet this act of depravity was not committed out of ravenous hunger or desperation. There was no famine in the Dutch Republic, despite the ongoing war. The eating of the flesh was carried out to spite the victims in a final humiliation, a vivid and gruesome demonstration of the hatred and resentment the people had felt towards their fallen Prime Minister. The public assassination and desecration of the fallen men's corpses may have been spontaneous, but was probably pre-planned, a symbolic act of violence that demonstrated that the House of Orange was back in charge, warning others of the grim fate that awaited anyone who dared to act against Prince William's interests. In an effort to end the chaos, Prince William was granted full control of the Dutch Republic and wasted no time in purging the government and civil service of his political enemies under the guise of restoring public order. With his power base secure, he then managed to end the war with England and France without the loss of any territory. Normality had returned to the Dutch state. As for the acts of cannibalism carried out on the former Prime Minister and his brother, no evidence would be found linking Prince William to the assassination. However, tellingly, the ringleaders of the mob who attacked the de Witts were not prosecuted, and the Prince of Orange even advanced their careers in what could be interpreted as a reward for their loyal service. Prince William would go on to claim the English throne through his marriage to Mary Stuart, and would successfully press this claim in 1689 when he usurped the English crown and became King William III of England. The dark downfall of Johan and Cornelis de Witt at the hands of their own people had directly contributed to the meteoric rise of William III to the very heights of power in Europe. As for his fallen rivals, a tongue and a finger bone of Johan and Cornelis de Witt are still kept at the Historical Museum in The Hague, neatly preserved in a miniature glass coffin as a reminder of the day the Dutch people turned on their Prime Minister and ate him. That's all I have for you for today. I hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I'll see you again soon.